We're a little over a month away from the referendum to decide whether Australia should change its constitution to insert an Indigenous voice to Parliament and the Executive. It represents an important milestone on a few fronts. If it succeeds, it will fundamentally change the essence of this nation. At Federation and even at the time of the 1967 referendum, our objective was clear, and that's one Australia where all the people in it are equal before the law. It was akin to Martin Luther King's conception of equality.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
It's been 60 years since Martin Luther King Jr. gave that speech, but it's never been more important a principle than it is now. Because at stake in the referendum, it is a decision on whether we want this nation to continue to rest on the principle that we are all equal individuals to be judged by our own behaviour. Well, what's the alternative on offer? Well, it's the notion that our rights in this democracy should be determined by the colour of our skin, and that we should be judged not by our own behaviour, but whether other people who have similar skin colour, now or in the past, did good things or bad things at some other point, usually in the past also. It's irrelevant that it's not your behaviour or your action, or that you would never have approved. The flip side of that is also true. People who have skin colour similar to those who were at some point in the past treated badly are branded permanent victims as a group, and because of their membership of that group, intergenerationally disempowered. Now, don't worry that all of the psychological evidence shows that concepts of intergenerational victimhood sap resilience, initiative, and the will to overcome. There is no way that this can be a step forward for anyone in this country. And the people that it will harm most are the about 20% of Aboriginal people who live in remote communities in still subpar conditions. If you think that the welfare state has, despite what were good intentions, been deeply harmful in some ways to a cohort of Aboriginal people, do you really think that a pay the rent mentality is going to shift that? Well, I think it's quite obvious that it will make it worse. And in doing so, it will divide this nation like never before. Now, we've talked before about the ways that this will throw sand in the gears of government, allowing activists to weaponise administrative law to block important projects that in many ways are essential to bringing jobs and prosperity and hope to remote places. And I've warned that two streams of rights in our democracy will inevitably lead to the abandonment of the fundamental principle that we are all equal before the law. Well, in some ways, the activists are already putting that on the table. Victoria's Yoorrook Justice Commission handed down a report this week into the child safety and criminal justice systems in Victoria. It's big on platitudes about how the overrepresentation of Aboriginal people in the child safety system and in the criminal justice system is the product of systemic racism, though it provides no actual evidence to support such a proposition, simply assuming it and then offering recommendations that depend and rely on that assumption. In fact, so strong is this assumption that the word racism is used some 127 times in the report. Now, how many times do you think that the words individual responsibility were used? Yeah, you guessed it, 0. And while we should acknowledge that, yes, racism has happened at times, and human beings of all races will from time to time fall short of what is model behaviour, no discussion of child safety or criminal justice is a sensible one if we aren't prepared to observe that we're dealing with human individuals, each with a capacity for free will and choices in every moment that we have the option of either making well or making poorly. In what could well be understood as the subtle racism of low expectations, the report seems to operate on the basis that Aboriginal people don't have the ability to choose or to step beyond tough situations or make good calls when faced with a range of options. And that's more than rude. It sells our Aboriginal brothers and sisters short. So the Yoorrook Justice Commission proposed 46 recommendations for reform. These include a separate child safety system with different standards and rules that applies only to Aboriginal people. It demanded the decriminalisation of offences that it links to disadvantage, and on their worldview, it's a pretty broad brush. Now, we should notice that they have forgotten the fact that this can at times be a chicken and egg situation where the disadvantage is at times the product of the offending. But the Commission hasn't troubled itself with that. From a first offence on, a person is disadvantaged. And from then on, they say that criminal conduct should no longer be a crime because it's the product of disadvantage. But only if you're an Aboriginal person. This should offend all Australians, no matter the colour of their skin. It recommends the re-education of the judiciary to apply different sentencing approaches and different approaches to running what criminal trials traditional procedure has been to what should apply if you are not Indigenous, being different to that which applies to those who are. Now remember, we've already got sentencing legislation in every state and territory that takes account of any disadvantage of a particular convicted person. But this proposition is different because it is entirely ethnicity-based. It demands an immediate rise to the age of criminal responsibility to 14 years and to, wait for it, prohibit the detention of a person under the age of 16 no matter what crimes they are convicted of. What could possibly go wrong with a criminal justice system like that? As the Queensland experience shows, no consequences for criminal actions is a recipe for disaster. And, along with the watering down of bail laws, the Commission demands the establishment of a non-police authority with the power to investigate, search and arrest police officers in response to public complaints, among other things. This is the kind of madness we get when we focus on group grievance and sorting Australians based on their race. It hasn't been working. If we're honest, it has worked nowhere since this seed was planted back in Whitlam's time, and it's only grown from there. So why would we, in The Voice or in anything else, ask for more of it? Change happens when we treat our fellow Australians, wherever they are from and whatever their race, like the brothers and sisters they are. When we take disadvantaged people one by one, offering a helping hand, but also expecting them to take responsibility for their improvement and to make good choices, just as we would do for ourselves and our own families. It doesn't come from locking racial division into our democracy. At a more philosophical level, this asks us to consider whether we want our laws to provide for equality of opportunity or equality of outcome. We should think about that because they're very different things. We're asking our laws by this proposition to do the latter, which is an impossible thing, and in doing so sacrificing equality of opportunity in pursuit of a utopian mirage. Instead, we must understand that we are all different, human beings with unique talents that we should harness and our own individualised challenges to overcome. True equality of opportunity, the kind that's based on what's on the inside of us, not on our race, is what best allows individuals of all walks of life to reach that potential. Will some people need a hand? Of course. And as good neighbours, we should offer it. But there is nothing helpful, nothing empowering and nothing effective in dividing the country by race and allowing us to shirk responsibility for our choices onto group grievances. When Yes campaigner Noel Pearson went on 2GB radio with Ben Fordham earlier this week, Mr Pearson said that, as a consequence of The Voice...
Of course we want the government of the day to listen carefully to the advice. I think we'll get better policies. We'll get better outcomes.
I don't know if you picked up on this. That word think. Well, he might think it might help. But at this stage, and given the permanency of a change to the Constitution, well, I'd like a little bit more than, oh, I think it'll help. We deserve better than that.